Dear learners, today's MOOC will be on the unit Marxist Perspective on Health and Illness from Module 3 Theoretical Perspectives to Understand Health. Let us begin the unit with an introduction of Marxism and Marxist perspective on health. Under the perspective of functionalism, good health and effective medical care are essential for the smooth functioning of the society. Patients must perform the sick role in order to be perceived as legitimately ill and to be exempted from their normal obligations. The physician-patient relationship is hierarchical. The patients have to follow the instruction of the physician. However, the conflict or the Marxist theory characterizes quality of health and quality of health care from the point of view of social inequality. People from disadvantaged social backgrounds are more likely to become ill and receive inadequate health care. The rich and the affluent get access to health and healthcare facilities because of their financial status in the society. Marxists claim that capitalism moves healthcare professions to privatization of healthcare services and establishes the drive to increase profit and power for a certain social class. Physicians, to increase their incomes, have tried to control the practice of medicine. They have tried to define social problems as medical problems. This economic tendency makes the medical field a profit-oriented organization. Therefore, Marxism focuses on political and economic determinations of medical care in capitalist societies. Marxism is one of the most significant philosophies that have contributed much to the modern world. It is a social, economic, and political philosophy that analyzes the impact of ruling class on laborers that leads to uneven distribution of wealth and privileges in the society. The theory was formulated by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in their work The Communist Manifesto. According to Marx, history demonstrates the existence of class struggle through 5 stages. Primitive communism, the age of hunter-gatherers where society was treated equally and no class was present. Slavery, where there was a class distinction between aristocrats and slaves. Feudalism, where there was a struggle between the landlords and those who used their lands. Capitalism, where the capitalists or the bourgeois profited off the workers or the proletariats. After that comes the phase of socialism, where the proletariats would revolt for justice and eventually form a communist society which is free of class distinction and has equal wealth. The Marxist theory views health and illness as a social class problem that is related to inequality and is defined by the bourgeois. Although the Marxist paradigm went still during the early 20th century, the field has developed rapidly during the recent years. According to them, health system mirrors the society's class structure through control over health institutions, stratification of health workers, and limited occupational mobility to health professions. Marxists have been examining mental health institutions and treatments, building on the analysis of social deviance and focusing on how psychiatric intervention serve as mechanism of social control developed to manage behavior that threatens to destabilize the capitalist system. They argue that mental illness is a strategic political concept rather than a scientific one. Now we will discuss about few major contributions that were made to the field of Marxism regarding health and illness by various eminent people. Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels says the condition of working class in England talks about child labor, environmental damage, low wages, bad conditions, poor health, death rates, and the social and political power of the oppressors. This book was the first major Marxist study of healthcare that describes the dangerous working and housing conditions that created ill health. Engels traced such diseases like tuberculosis, typhoid, and typhus to malnutrition, inadequate housing, contaminated water supply, and overcrowding. His analysis of healthcare was a part of broader study of working class conditions under the capitalist industrialization. Next, Rudolf Virchow. Rudolf Virchow's pioneering studies in infectious diseases, epidemiology, and social medicine was inspired by Engels' thought. He, with the request of Prussian government, investigated a severe typhus epidemic in the rural areas of the country. He recommended a series of economic, political, and social changes that included increased employment, better wages, local autonomy in government, agricultural cooperatives, and a more progressive taxation system. He expressed two overriding themes. First, there are many interacting causes of diseases, and the most important are the material conditions of everyday life. Second, an effective healthcare system cannot limit itself to treating the illness only. Instead, it has to coincide with the development of economic, political, and social changes. Next, Althusser. Althusser in 1969 argues that there are institutions that control the population through the ideological state apparatus such as education and religion and health. Example, control of welfare and disability rights. Curative medicines can barely veil the causes of social illness. Next, Navarro in 1979 suggested that doctors are agents of state who promotes individualistic view of responsibility for illness. Next, McKinley. McKinley gives us another dimension where he says that doctors are themselves little more than workers in the vast profit-making pharmaceutical industries. Beatrice Elder Bolton and R.T. Vierkant in their book Health Communism first examines how capitalism has institutionalized health, disability, and madness and illness to create a class that is seen as surplus. Then it looks at the grave threat capitalism possesses to global public health and at the rare movements that have successfully challenged the extractive economy of health. Ultimately, the authors argue that severe radical laws should be required and centered on these surpluses to sever health from capitalism. The former editor-in-chief of NEJM, Bud Railman, coined the term medical industrial complex, echoing Marxist anxieties about the commodification of everything dear to us. Howard Wigzin, in his contribution, A Marxist View of Medical Care, in the paper Annals of Internal Medicine, questions whether major improvements in health systems can occur without fundamental changes in the broad social order. Even the non-Marxists believe that problems in health system reflect problems in our larger society. Now we will discuss about class structure in the health sector. Number 1, control over health institutions. Navarro has documented the pervasive control that corporate and upper middle classes exert within the policy-making bodies of health institutions. These classes predominates the governing bodies of private foundations in health system, private and state medical teaching institutions, and local voluntary hospitals. This pattern of control over health institutions reflect some pattern of class dominance that has arisen in economic and political life. Number 2, stratification within health institutions. As members of upper middle class, physicians occupy the highest stratum among the workers in health institutions. At the bottom of institutional hierarchy are clerical workers, aides, orderlies, kitchen and janitorial personnel who are working class of the healthcare system. Third, occupational mobility. Class mobility into professional positions is quite limited. There is constantly a small representation of lower middle and working classes among the medical students and practicing doctors. According to Marxism, inequality in distribution of healthcare services in capitalist society arises from the marginalization of some categories of the population who do not contribute to the economic system. This exclusion may include women, people with disability, elderly people, and every person who doesn't contribute to the economy, regardless of the health status and needs of the person. Along with the class factors, Marxist theory pays attention to the role played by healthcare institutions and healthcare industry in the economy. The impetus behind the ever-expanding activities of large industrial and financial enterprises in the sphere of health and healthcare, its effect on shaping healthcare services, role of medical profession vis-a-vis the health industry on the other hand, and the patient consumers on the other. The role played by these institutions in social control and perpetuation of values which are reinforcing the existing social order based on class, gender, and racial domination. Now we are going to look at some important reasons why Marxists believe that healthcare and medicine has become capitalist. Number 1. During the past century, economic capital has become more concentrated in a similar number of companies, which we term as monopolies. Monopoly capital has become a prominent feature of most capitalist health systems. Following are some of the ways in which this monopoly capital is being manifested in the health sector. Number 1, the medical centers. Since about 1910, a continuous growth of medical centers has occurred. Capital is highly concentrated on them. It is oriented mainly to advanced technologies. Practitioners receive training with high-level technology and specialization is given high value. This has resulted in health workers refusing to practice in areas without medical centers. This nearly unrestricted growth of medical centers and their role in medical education and the technological imperative they encourage has contributed to the misdistribution of healthcare workers and facilities. Next, finance capital. Monopoly capital is apparent in the position of banks, trusts and insurance companies, which makes the largest profit-making corporations under capitalism. Finance capital figures prominently in current health reform proposals which permit the continuation of the insurance industry. Moreover, corporate investment in health maintenance organization is increasing with the assumption that national health insurance, when enacted, will assure the profitability of these ventures. The medical industrial complex. The military industrial complex has provided a model of industrial penetration in the health system and is popularized as a term which is known as medical industrial complex. Exploitation of illness for private profit is a primary feature of the health systems in advanced capitalist societies. Recent reports have criticized the pharmaceutical and medical equipment industries for advertising and marketing practices, prices and patent collisions, marketing of largely untested drugs to third world and promotion of expensive diagnostic and therapeutic innovations without controlled trials demonstrating their effectiveness. Next, cost effectiveness. Analysis of cost-effective approach by Marxist researchers has led to the criticism of the same. The cost-effective approach in health system does not help clarify the overall dynamics that encourage the adoption of costly and ineffective technological innovations. The practices evaluated by cost-effectiveness research generally emerge with the growth of monopoly capital in the health systems. Costly innovations often are linked to the expansion of medical centers, the penetration of finance capital in health system, promotion of new drugs and instrumentation by medical industries. Cost-effectiveness research and clinical decision analysis remain incomplete unless they consider broader political and economic trends that propel apparent irrationalities in the health system. Other than the reasons discussed now, there are few more that we will be briefly talking about. Health policy recommendations reflect different interest groups and political and economic goals. The state's intervention in healthcare generally protects the capitalist economic system and the private sector. Medicine is increasingly becoming a market commodity profitable to dominant capitalist interests. It is specialized and hierarchical and not individual. Marxists believe that doctors are gatekeepers who work with the ruling class. According to them, healthcare professionals make sure that individuals can go back to work as soon as possible. For them, government does not spend money to tackle ill health, example, poverty, unemployment, and poor housing. Marxists are focused on how definition of treatment of health and illness are influenced by the nature of economic activity in capitalist society and how medicine as a major institution is shaped by it. Therefore, medicine has now become a corporate commodity. Now, we will discuss about Marxist views on state and state intervention in health sector. Marx and Engels emphasize that state's crucial role in protecting the capitalist economic system and the interest of the capitalist class. The state comprises the interconnected public institutions that act to preserve the capitalist economic system and interests of the capitalist class. This includes all the extensive legislative and judicial branches of the government, the military and criminal justice system, all of which hold varying degrees of coercive power. It also encompasses non-coercive institutions within educational, public welfare, and healthcare systems. Through such non-coercive institutions, state offers services or conveys ideologic messages that both stabilize and legitimize the capitalist system. Now we are going to discuss about such interventions in details. Through such non-coercive institutions, the states offer services or conveys ideologic messages that both stabilize and legitimize the capitalist system. The private-public contradiction. Within the health system, the public sector as a part of the state operates through public expenditures and employs health workers in public institutions. The private sector is based in private practice and in companies that manufacture medical products or control medical finance capital. A general theme of Marxist analysis is that private sector drains public resources and health workers' time in behalf of profit and to the detriment of patients using public sector. In most large cities, public hospitals are facing cutbacks, closure, or conversion to private ownership and control. This heightens low-income patients' difficulties in finding adequate health care. It also reinforces the tendency to dump the low-income patients into public institutions. General functions of the state within the state system. The state's function in the health system have increased in scope and complexity. In the first place, through the health system, the state acts to legitimize the capitalist economic system based in public health and welfare programs. The second major function of the state is to protect and reinforce the private sector more directly. The third but subtler function of the state is reinforcement of dominant frameworks in scientific and clinical medicine that are consistent with the capitalist economic system and the suppression of alternative frameworks that might threaten the system. Now we are going to discuss another very important topic, which is Marxist feminist perspective of healthcare. Marxist feminists see the particular oppression of women as generated by contradictions within the development of capitalism. women's unpaid labor at home and unpaid labor in the workforce both serve the interest of the owners of capital. Marxist feminist perspective emphasizes the women's position in subordination is largely the result of interaction between patriarchy, which is the dominance of men, and the needs of capitalism. The healthcare system serves these same interests. It maintains and perpetuates the social class structure while becoming increasingly alienated from health needs of majority of population. Many feminist perspectives have been drawn to medicalization of women's bodies as an illustration of social control by patriarchal medical profession, arguing that most of these professions are male and use scientific knowledge formulated largely by men. Feminists believe that men also primarily control the reproductive processes, including access to contraception, pregnancy and childbirth, and reproductive technology. Women must submit themselves to male authority and knowledge, reducing their ability to make decisions. Their submission to such medical intervention reinforces female characteristics of passivity and dependence and can be seen as illustration of patriarchal social control over women. Scientific understanding of women's bodies with regard to reproduction has historically had consequences for their social role. An article, The Mode of Reproduction in Transition, a Marxist feminist analysis of effects of reproductive technologies by Martha E. Gimenez, talks about the abundant growth of feminist literature that examines the implication of reproductive technologies that separate genetic, physiological, and social motherhood. An explanation for the development of these technologies in terms of motivations of men, which include scientists, doctors, lawyers, pharmacrats, technocrats, etc., is given. This has led to victimization of women by medical and legal institutions and commodification of these technologies. In the process of changing the biological conditions of intergenerational social reproduction, these technologies have established a material basis for structural separation between mode of procreation, which is open to public scrutiny, medical intervention, and state supervision, and the mode of physical reproduction, which function in the privacy of households. Now, we will move forward with few criticisms to Marxist perspective on health. While some health institutions are affected by conflict-related conditions, others are not. People may maintain their health or become sick, and these outcomes can have very little or nothing to do with conflict, politics, interest groups, competition, class struggles, and so on. Even though some Marxists argue that the free health services by government is a victory of working class, critics like Lee Grand, 1979, argues that in fact the middle classes have gained more from the health services than the lower classes. Now let us sum up what we have done so far. We began with a brief introduction to Marxism and Marxist perspective of health and illness. Next, we have discussed about contributions made by few eminent people to the field of Marxist perspective of health and illness. Then we have discussed about class structure in healthcare. After that, we discussed about reasons why Marxists believe healthcare and medicine is capitalist. We also discussed about Marxist view on state and state's intervention in health sector. We talked about health from the Marxist feminist point of view as well. We ended the unit by providing criticisms to the Marxist perspective on health and illness. With that, we have come to the end of today's unit. Thank you.